I'm not really sure I'm making a contribution. On this episode, you're gonna see how Alif was able to, with a little bit of coaching, recognize that what he'd been doing all along really was a big contribution.
Honestly, I'll be very honest. Like, I pulled a straight up all-nighter for that. Like,
Yes.
We were on a road trip down to like New Orleans, and like throughout the road trip, I was on about 21,000 words at that point. But I was still writing stories constantly throughout, like while we were driving down, and then we ended up in Nashville, and all my friends went out, and I just found like a 24-hour diner, and I wrote a thing until 8:30 a.m. And but like,
awesome.
Like the problem was just like trying to sort them into like the chapters, and that was really getting me. And I realized it was obviously far from like anything like it was just quintessential first draft, really. And
that's what it's supposed to be, though, right? Like, you gave me enough. I think what we have here now, this framework with the revisions and the process ahead, I think you've got a fucking home run on your hand.
Now the 2-2. Well hit down the left field line. Way back and touch them all, Joe. You'll never hit a bigger home run in your life.
When many of us start out our creation, when we go out to begin that journey, we start out from a place of curiosity, what we hope to learn and what we hope to discover. Now, we're not an expert at the beginning, but as we go along and learn, suddenly we develop that expertise. And for Alif, he went on that journey, interviewing some of the best and brightest at companies like Tesla and SpaceX and Google and Facebook and Amazon to discover how early employees were able to get hired at some of the most difficult to get hired at firms across the country. And as he wrote and created, he suddenly thought, did I actually have anything to contribute? And what was interesting is that when I read it, I quickly realized that Alif had unlocked a little bit of magic. And that's why a little bit of coaching can help us recognize that the learning we've been doing all along, that may seem like little small pieces to us, when combined together really is quite a big contribution. And so sometimes that process of learning may seem like we haven't advanced very far because we're in the weeds of it. But when you step back and look at it, you may suddenly realize that you've made a much bigger contribution than you ever thought was possible.
The key thing that I was thinking about with your book is you sort of wanted to organize it in a way that you can talk about it clearly.
Yeah.
And so the EDGE framework, I think the idea is to sort of organize these, basically these chapters into a 4-part series that allow you to talk about, them sort of in an organized way. So I call the EDGE framework I took your stuff and I was listening to it, and I was trying to figure out how would we structure the chapters in a way that sort of better show that off. Sorry, I'm just getting through it because I want to make sure I say the right things for what each of the EDGE pieces mean. But oftentimes this is a very common thing that happens when you're writing a book, is you're putting all this stuff together, and you're sort of like, we don't use an outline, intentionally so you write something. But the EDGE framework together to sort of organize it. So if you go down to the bottom, you see basically the chapter now. And the 4 parts of the book are educate, demonstrate, grit, and engage a coach, or engage in coaching, or whatever we want to call it.
Yeah.
I think and so the EDGE framework is like, what I would say is, the purpose of this book is I wanted to study what the top 1% of people who are getting hired into the most attractive companies in the world do differently to get hired. Right?
Yes.
So I think the pitch behind this is that. And so I think if you take your content, it breaks itself well. They educate themselves. They demonstrate what they know. They operate with grit, and they always engage some kind of coaching or help. And I think, even in your story, right? Like, I operate in some ways as a coach or help to that one. So that's the EDGE framework, is like, it's a way to talk about it is, if I were to position your book, you're pitching to someone, is to say, listen, there is 100 people that apply for a job at, all of these companies, and one person gets it. What does that 1% do differently? Well, they do the EDGE framework. I think the reason that is important for you, it's important for anyone who's writing a book, but in particular for you now, is when you sit down and talk to your book, they're going to say, what's your book about?
Yeah.
You're going to say this. You're going to basically say, listen, I want to work at one of these, I want to work at some of the best companies in the world. And I realized that it wasn't going to be enough for me just to go to a good school or to get good grades. I had to do something different. So I went out and interviewed dozens of people who work at these companies and tried to listen to what they did. And it came out, they did 4 things that I call my EDGE framework. And this EDGE framework could teach anyone else how to get hired into the best companies in the world.
Right. So you kind of like is the Edge framework something that's already kind of like known, or like
This is your framework. I just took your words and created the Edge framework. Which
you coined the term and actually made the framework. So like,
you coined the term by what you wrote. I just organized it in a way that made sense.
I'm just, would you have a problem, and like if you do this totally fine, like with me using that, because like
I wrote it for you. That's because I'm like your partner in crime on this, my man.
I feel kind of like it's a little I feel like I'm plagiarizing a little.
No, not at all, man. Listen, this is what I do, right? Remember the coaching part? I basically am listening to your book over and over again and reading it. I mean, and it's why it takes me a while. I want to make sure to be able to take all the stuff. Like, you did all the hard work. I just read through it and sort of said, like, all right, Alif is saying all this interesting stuff, but it's not sort of packageable yet, right? Like, you had I mean, you wrote like 30,000 words here. So you wrote all the words. Yeah. My job was just to look through and organize it for you.